I was in a convenience store with my little 8-year-old son the other day, and we always try to screen the children from the magazines. I'm sure you're all familiar with that process of trying to avert your eyes as you try to buy something at the grocery store. And this was a little different situation, because in this case I actually said to my son, look at this picture. And who was the picture on the little People magazine or whatever it was? It was Britney Spears. Now, I don't know if anybody knows who she is. Normally, we obviously I would encourage all of you to not have anything to do with looking at pictures of Britney Spears. She's a very sad person, isn't she? But the reason I pointed her out in this case to my son was because she's in a whole lot of trouble right now. And I think it's very interesting for us who are trying to live in a different way as Catholics to see the reward that's being given to the pop kings and queens of the pop music industry. And what Britney Spears is going through right now, this picture was a picture of her with a shaved head. Everybody, you probably have seen this. You almost can't help but see it. It's everywhere, because what's happened to her is she's crashed and burned. And no one wants to see that happen to a fellow human being, do we? We don't celebrate that. But on the other hand, it should give all of us, whether it's an old man like me or young people like you just starting out, a really good idea of where the pop culture is leading people these days, even those who are sort of, as I say, the crown princesses and princes of the pop culture. Kind of look into the vacant eyes of Britney Spears with her shaved head and in and out of rehab for drug abuse, and they're talking now about taking her children away from her because she's obviously not fit to be a mother. You can sort of see this maternal instinct even in somebody like Britney Spears. She wants to be more than that. So money, power, fame, MTV, VH1, all these things, they don't make happiness. They don't necessarily translate into happiness. And I think that's a great example. She's a great example of somebody who bears this out, that the pursuit of the cross, the pursuit of being ladylike, being like Our Lady, being like the saints, it may not seem to have the glory and the glamour that the pop music industry and the pop TV and movies that presents, but the dark side is not hard to find. Another good example would be this Anna Nicole Smith creature, who I'm sure no one knows in this room much about. I know not much about her, but to see what's happened to that, another youngish person, she's not an old woman, to see how this industry raises her to the top for just a few fleeting moments. And this is the way the devil always works. Raises her to the top, and then crash, down she goes, a drug addict, all sorts of problems. Her own son has to witness her own son, her own children dying. They're fighting over her body. They're fighting over her children. She's fighting with her mother. There's this horrible Luciferian, demonic evidence of where the culture is leading. Not only those of us who are tempted to get into rock music or pop music or go to see all the movies or watch all the TV, but also those who are performing. We see it right from the beginning. Elvis Presley. Anybody ever heard of Elvis Presley? Okay. The king of rock music kind of does the same thing in the end, crashes and burns. He's a drug addict. He dies a very sad and horrible death, lonely death, a miserable person. So it's good to think about these things when we, especially as young people, are at these crossroads all the time. What am I going to do? What do I really believe? What do I want to be? How much of what I'm being taught in school by the priests and by the nuns and by my parents, how much of that do I believe and do I want to define me versus am I just tolerating it to stay out of trouble? And these are the things you're going to have to be asking yourselves now as you get older. I don't mean to be old Grandpa Mo here, but I am old Grandpa Mo, so let me be old Grandpa Mo with you. It seems like when I see you, I went to a school very similar to this, and oh gosh, what would it have been? I graduated from there in 1984. It seems like 84 minutes ago. It happens so fast that you go from being young and idealistic and you have the future in front of you to being old like me and tired and not able to handle giving a few words on 2.5 hours of sleep. So it happens very, very, very fast. So, but we're at the crossroads, you're at the crossroads, you have to decide, what are you going to do? What do you really believe? And in a sense, I'm so glad that it's the older kids that are here. I didn't know for sure if there would be younger students. And typically, when I talk about music and culture, you don't want to speak too much about some of this dark side of the culture in which we live in, because you don't want to dwell on it. but you have to be aware of it. And so I'm not going to go into any graphic details or anything else. But we don't have a lot of time. They're moving very, very quickly right now against schools like this, against families like yours, against people like you. They don't want the beliefs and the faith and the morality that this school represents. They don't want that to be in the world, and they don't want that to spread in society. They want to shut it down. They call it, you know what they call it? They call it hate. What you're being taught in this school, which is based on 2,000 years of Catholic teaching, Catholic tradition, Catholic history, the civilization that built Christendom, that built Europe, that built the greatest cathedrals, the greatest music, the greatest opera in the world, they're now calling that civilization, that faith, hate. Why? Because we believe the whole world should have this belief, this creed of ours. We believe we should share it, as the Church has always taught. We have to share our beliefs with society in which we live. But if we do that now, we're not tolerating those who don't share our beliefs. You see how it works? So in saying that there's a need for conversion, what they're saying against Christianity and against Catholicism is when we say there's a need for conversion, that means we're being intolerant of our neighbors who don't have the Catholic faith. And therefore, who are the haters? We are the haters. The new definition of hate, then, is to follow Christ. So the problem is, and how do I know this? Because I don't know if any of you have heard this or not, but recently, most of the traditional Catholic movement was designated a hate group by an organization called the Southern Poverty Law Center, running from the Society of St. Pius X all the way over to the Remnant and everything in between, has been designated a hate group by an organization that monitors Nazis, Ku Klux Klans, ugly outfits like that. They're now trying to include traditional Catholicism in their list of hate groups. So what's the deal for us, for you guys, even for you younger ones? We don't have a lot of time to be saying, well, I'm going to be discerning what I'm going to be if I'm going to take Catholicism seriously. Even at 10, 11, 12 years old, you are being called, and you are given, you know this because you're sitting here and your parents are so happy to have this school. You know that you've been given a grace. You've been given something very special in that you don't have to deal with what the little Britney Spears fans at 10 years old are having to deal with, which is not a glamorous thing, as we already talked about. So what to do? You know what you're learning, your catechism. You know, for example, what if I were to say to you, why did God make you? What would you say? It's a Catholic school, huh? God made you to know Him, to love Him, and to serve Him in this world, right? So that you can be happy with Him forever in the next, okay? Let me ask you a question. You don't have to answer this. You don't have to raise your hands if you don't want to, but because your teachers and some of your priests are here. But how many of you like rock music, pop music? That's a loaded question. There's a brave girl. Stand up and take a bow. Okay. Very good, very good. No, the reason I ask that is because one of the real tragedies of how this issue has been dealt with in the past, even when I was young, is to stand up here and say, if you like that stuff, you're going to hell. There's something wrong inside of you, okay? Kind of this very extreme and severe way so that all young people are afraid to say, well, I kind of think it's catchy. You know, I kind of like these little ditties. They're kind of fun. They make me want to dance or whatever. So what I would say to young people, let's get past that. Of course it's likable. It's made to be likable. If it weren't likable, it wouldn't have had the success that it had in taking a largely Christian society in the late 1940s and early 1950s, nominally at least, and destroying Christian morality and Christian morals with the sexual revolution, the drug revolution, the revolution against family, the homosexual revolution, and so forth. The music is what made those revolutions happen. You're too young to know specifically which revolutions I'm talking about, but maybe you've heard names like John Lennon. Maybe you've heard names like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, some of these old men, even older than me, than I am, who were instrumental in getting rock music started. It was back when it was still rock music. Now it's pop, or it's R&B, or it's whatever the next generation wants to call it, but it's all basically the same music. And so it's so important to realize that the fact that you like it does not mean anything. First of all, it doesn't mean that you're evil, because the devil always does this. He always does, no matter what we do, even when we choose to sin, we're choosing what we think to be a good, what we think is going to make us happy. And so it's the same with rock music. The fact that it's pleasurable, let's get past that and realize that it is very dangerous, and it always has been very dangerous. And that if we truly are on this earth to serve God, now remember, to augment this point, and maybe I'll get in trouble with your teachers or with your priests later on. And oh my goodness, my own mother is here today, so I'm going to get in trouble with my own mom. I had the household that I grew up in was completely rock and roll free, TV free, movie free, and everything else. But I really wanted to be with the other kids that I ran into, especially when I'm 16, 17 years old, and I'm out in the streets, and I just felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. I didn't even know who Gilligan was. I just... And so the music was for me, and this is why it's so important to think, when people think, well, what's bad music? I don't know what bands you might have heard of today, but somebody like an Ozzy Osbourne or a Marilyn Manson or a real degenerate satanic type. There's one called Zombie out there now, Rob Zombie, who likes to just scream satanic lyrics into his microphone and his personal problems into his microphone, record it, and sell it to you guys. So those are the real extremes, and I always say, I honestly don't think that's a huge threat to people that have grown up as you have in small schools like this, traditional Catholic families, traditional Catholic friends. The problem is the softer music, the music that just hammers away at you, hammers away at everything you believe in. And I know you know what I'm talking about because I was sitting right where you are 10 years ago, or 15. And I know what it was like to want to be part of that, to sort of connect to that generation. And I had that, where I'd go out and the way I could connect was through the music. Because heaven knows there was nobody in my house going to the movies, or there was no VCRs back then. I hate to say it, that's how old I am. But so the music was the way. The music was the channel that really I felt was a way for me to sort of escape the walls of the traditional Catholic family. Because that was my temptation at the time. That was my temptation. I wanted to just sort of blend in. And so the music affected me very, very, very much, to the point where I finally, unbeknownst to my parents, joined a rock band. I got into it all to that extent. And it was a dark side. It was a dark period. But yeah, so it has that hold over us, and you have to anticipate it. You have to know what to do with it, because it's not. A lot of young people will say, "Well, I don't even listen to the lyrics." It's not the lyrics, and they'll say, "Well, the great Mozart was a Freemason, so there have been bad musicians that did good music in the past." True. So there's these little sort of things that we put up, these walls that we put up, to give us an excuse for why when we're going to listen to our specific kind of music. We don't listen to the words. We don't pay attention to their lifestyles. We just want to hear the music. But the thing that if there's one thing I want you to remember from today's little talk, and I hope I'm being coherent. I am very tired. But it's not the lyrics primarily. It's not the performers primarily. And this is where it gets a little tricky. It's the music itself. And I know you guys are saying, what is he talking about? The music itself. What's he saying? Have you ever been first of all, before you can appreciate what rock music can do to your soul and to your psyche and to emotionally to you, psychologically to you, in the negative sense, you have to consider music itself. You ever think of those guys like in the Civil War? I'm a big Civil War buff. And the little fellows with the drums and the fife, and they're out walking in front of all these guys, and they're going to take the bullets first? Can you imagine being those guys? They're walking right out in front of the columns, right? Well, odds are the first shots that are fired are going to take these poor guys out. What are they doing out there? Does anybody know what they're doing out there? Does anybody? Can you guess? Yeah. With what? Music. Okay? That's how important music is and has been for 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. That people that generals, that kings and queens have used music to bring men and to put them in front of other men with swords or with guns, whatever it may be, and to clash and to die. The music moved them. So what I did, and what I assume maybe many of you do, when you're arguing with your parents, if you've gotten to that point, you just say, well, it's just music. But that is such an ignorant thing to say on the part of a young person who just doesn't realize that music has been used to inspire warriors. It is used to bury our dead. It's used in our Mass, in our liturgy. The Church itself uses music. Plato once said that if he wanted, the great philosopher Plato, 2,000 years, before Christ. But he made a point in his book called The Republic, in which he said, if I want to control the future of the state, I don't need control over the laws. I need control over the music to which the young people listen. Okay? So it's so important before you can have any serious discussion about what might be wrong with this music that you see that's everywhere now. You have to understand how important music is to begin with. and how the church has used it, and how revolutions have used it. How you ever heard of Martin Luther? How he used it, his Book of Song, how he used it to instill his heresy against the Catholic Church into the people more quickly. How the communists used it in 1917. How the sexual revolutions of the 1960s. You ever heard of a thing called Woodstock? Okay, it's emblematic of the whole sexual revolution of the 1960s. And without the music, it wouldn't have existed. So in other words, the music that has brought our society to the dismal position and state that it is today was rock, pop music. And it was used by people who understood, like I said before, not the lyrics, not the performers, the structure of the music itself is revolutionary. And maybe some of you, when you go on and go to college or whatever, will become musicologists, or you'll study this idea. What is music? What makes up music? And then if you do that, you'll recognize that what happens with rock music, pop music, R&B, whatever you want to call it, is have you ever heard of Palestrina? You ever heard of Victoria, the great Renaissance composers who wrote some of the most beautiful Renaissance sacred music in the history of the church? Okay, what that music does, that Renaissance music, or Gregorian chant, obviously first, number one, you'd use Gregorian chant. What it does is it appeals to your soul through your intellect, through your mind. It lifts you up to God. It lifts you up to higher thoughts, and that's why the church uses it. Other kinds of music, say folk music, tends to attract more to your heart, to your emotions. The music that's out there, the beat-centric music that's out there, appeals to the lower appetite. So it's an inversion of music. It used to be that melody for Palestrina, melody is everything. But now you have, not only is harmony inverted or playing games with the melody in a way that it shouldn't, but you also have the beat that supersedes everything. You ever heard rap music? The music, what happened to the music? It disappeared. It's gone. So you have just the beat. Now, what that does to your psyche, to your emotions, I'm sure you can guess. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not going to try to tell you in clinical doctor terms what that does. But you can imagine. Have you ever tenderized a piece of meat, or you watched your mother or your grandmother tenderize a piece of meat? They take a hammer, right, and they bang it or whatever they use to pound that meat, all right? And it just goes on and on and on and on until that meat is just completely, ready to be consumed. Has no resistance left to it. Doesn't it make sense, even to you younger guys, I think you're younger, maybe a little younger, doesn't it make sense that if you listen all day long to music that, like that meat hammer, just boom, 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 pounds against your body, pounds against your heart, right? Eventually it's going to start pounding against your soul, and you are going to be tenderized like that piece of meat. Spiritually, morally, you're going to become accustomed to it. So does this make sense to you? And we could go into we don't have time, and my brain isn't working right, so we can't go into the real technical part of what is wrong with this beat-centric music right now. I'm sure you've heard it from your parents and from your teachers and from your priests. I hope you have. But that should be a fairly obvious thing. If you've ever been in a mall or anywhere where that music is playing very loud, it does make you a little bit numb, and it's supposed to make you a little numb. I hope you've never been to a dance club, a modern pop dance club. That's what happens in there. The conscience is pounded to such an extent that you will not resist any temptation that the devil comes along with, right? Comes up with. And so you have to realize that the music has that capability to do it anyway, right? Then you throw in the lyrics. Then you throw in drug-addicted performers, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and the rest. Can you see why I said when we first started, we don't have a lot of time? They want to destroy the faith. They want to destroy the church. They've already almost destroyed the priesthood. San Diego, one of the biggest dioceses in the archdioceses in the country, just yesterday or the day before, filed bankruptcy because of these scandalous lawsuits that are going on involving the priesthood. Okay, so the church is being destroyed. Innocence is being destroyed. Catholic family life, not Catholic family life is being destroyed. You all know this. I don't want this to be a big doom and gloom end of your day. But we do have to get ready. And if we believe, if you don't believe in God, if you don't believe you're here to save your soul, what are we here for? What would be the point? The greatest minds in the history of the world St. Thomas Aquinas, let's just use him. Even if you walked into any secular university and took a philosophy class, they will start with St. Thomas Aquinas even still. He was such a brilliant mind, right? He believed everything. Everything that you're taught is founded on his philosophy, on his theology. But it's all broken down to those three things that we have to do. Know, love, and serve God. That's all St. Thomas Aquinas did. That's all he taught. And the greatest minds, you can go back 1,000 years and find people that are even smarter than the priests, maybe the priests and teachers in this great school for 1,000 years, and millions of them who believed what you believe, who love who you love, who dedicated themselves to Our Lady and to the church and who died for her, right? Right? That's what they did. So this, when you think about what you have, this pearl of great price has been given to you, and you're just kids. I don't want you to take this too terribly seriously at the moment. But it would be great if something I said just triggered in you, inside of you, to make you realize the gift you've been given. And I used to hate when people said that to me when I was a kid. But now I see that it's true. It's true. That you've been given this little pass for whatever reason to sort of grow and form as young men and women in love with life and wanting to have fun and sure wanting to have a full life and maybe be a priest or a nun or get married and have children and do all those wonderful things in life. But at the same, first and foremost, to know that you're Christian, that you follow Christ, that you're a Catholic. And so then we get back to, when you think of that music that you can't get away from, that you hear all the time, when it's attacking everything that you believe in, and everything your priests believe in, and everything your teachers believe in, and everything your parents believe in, you have to ask yourself, what part does pop music, does MTV, does VH1, even does most of the country music, what part does it play in this role that is mine to save my soul? How is it going to help me? How is it going to bring me closer to the goal? Can you imagine, for 2 seconds, St. Tarcisius? Can you see St. Tarcisius with his MP3 player walking down the streets of Rome? Can you imagine in a million years? Can you imagine St. John Vianney, the great curé of ours? You've heard of him, right? Can you imagine him sitting with his feet up on his coffee table, clicking through, watching cable TV? Of course not. So what we have is we're surrounded, we're inundated, and we're so used to it now that you hardly even realize it. Everywhere. I went into a Target store. Do you have Targets out here? I went into a Target the other day. And I was looking it was my wife's birthday, and I forgot to get her a card, and I had like 20 minutes to get her a card. And I'm in the card section, and all of a sudden I'm aware of this horrible din. But it was really loud. What is going on? And I look over there. It's the electronics department, right? Where they have all the little video games, and there's these poor little guys, just all confused, and I'm watching them, they're going at it, doing this for hours and hours, and the unbelievably loud music, this rap beat going. This whole section of the store is, dedicated, as they all are now, to the electronics department. There's something that I think is very contradictory to this, to the cross, to the silence of the cross, to devotions, to the Mass, to religion, to family life, in just that in that section of a Target store. And here's this little old grandmother just walking by in front of the section of the store. She didn't even look up. I mean, if it had happened 50 years ago, she would have thought she was walking by some kind of an exorcism or something. I mean, it was the sound of hell, and she didn't even notice. And the same thing happened today on the airplane. We're flying something called Frontier Airlines, which actually has chipmunks and foxes on the tail of the airplane, which is very unsettling. I don't know if you've ever seen Frontier Airlines. Very strange. But anyway, they actually say, thank you for flying with us, and Woody the chipmunk thanks you as well, or some crazy thing. It was on the tail of the plane. So anyway, every person on the airplane has their own personal TV now. Personal TV. If you go into a pub or a restaurant, and there's not just one TV anymore, there's 25 TVs, and they're all plasmas, and they're all 28 inches, and there's 10 shows going on at one time on one thing. We can't get used to this. Don't allow yourselves to get used to this as you grow up. This is not normal. You're young people trying to figure out, trying to ascertain your vocation, your calling, right? As you get older, as you graduate from high school. How are you going to hear the calling when you're surrounded by this din and the flashing lights and the electronics everywhere and the headphones and all of this craziness, don't let yourself get used to it. It isn't normal. It is not normal. And again, in the airplane, everyone has their own TV. And one of the free channels showed the same video of one of these poor creatures doing her thing, and, as we're flying. There should be an affront that you pay all of this money to fly in an airplane, and then your senses are violated and assaulted by what would have been considered pornography 50 years ago. But the point of the story is, this lady sits down a few seats from us. First thing she said is, "Oh my," when she sees this video going. "Oh my, it's gyrations," she says. And yeah, I agree. It's ridiculous. You have to find someplace else to look as you're trying to fly on the airplane. But half an hour into the flight, no, she wasn't saying anything. No one was commenting. Everyone was used to it. But there she was. The girl was still doing it all the way through the flight. Why? Why do they do this? At one point, this little thing comes up on the screen and says, if you'd like to take a cat nap, here's how you turn off your TV. So you actually just watch the screen pretty much now until you pass out. That's what they want you to do. Just keep looking at the screen. And all I could think, have you ever heard of George Orwell's 1984? That's all I could think of. Big Brother is all around. But guess what? He doesn't much care about me. I'm 40. He doesn't care. But what he wants is he wants you guys. He wants the future. And I think he's pretty desperate right now. I think they're pretty desperate to make this final great push for innocence in America. Because they're really going for it now. They're trying to dictate what Catholic schools can teach as what is right and wrong, legally. They're trying to put laws in that would forbid your religion teacher to teach what the natural definition of family is, for example. So they want you. They want your soul. Now, I'm not here to scare you. I don't think anyone in this room, though, wants to end up like Justin Timberlake or Britney Spears. I just have a feeling that at the end of the day, that's not what you want to do with your lives. And I'll bet $100 I'm right on that. So when we're encouraged by our priests and by those who know our faith to take the courageous stand and to stand up for the faith, to be like Edmund Campion, to be like Father Michael Pro, to be like Thomas More, they're not asking us to do something that's going to end up leaving us unhappy. I mean, do you know the name of the executioner of Thomas More? Do you know what the name of the guys were that fired the 5 rounds into Father Michael Pro's chest as he stuck out his arms like this and said, "Viva Cristo Rey"? Do you know who the guys were that were doing the shooting? Who cut Edmund Campion open and pulled out his innards before they martyred him? Who are those people? Nobody knows. I don't know. You don't know. And yet 500 years later, we're still lighting vigil lights in front of these men, these great Catholics, who stood up, and what did they do? First and foremost, what did they do? They did something different. They fought against those who fought against Christ. Thomas More didn't want to be a martyr, did he? Edmund Campion didn't. He didn't climb up on London Bridge and say, "I am a Jesuit, I spit on you heretics," did he? No. No, he didn't. He got smart. He got disguises, didn't he? Went around in priest holes, hiding, doing whatever he could to stay alive and to preserve the faith in an age when it was under attack. We read those books now and we think, wow, that's really great, you know. This is like the Scarlet Pimpernel or something, only it's totally Catholic, right? It's great stories, it's wonderful things. So when we're called by the church, when God gives us life in a time like this, there's a reason for it, right? We have to learn to take that challenge, not to look at it as dismal and depressing, but to say, wow, I have a chance. I have a chance to actually do something. I know in my case, I think to myself, it might get me to heaven if I have to be martyred. I don't know if I'm going to make it otherwise. Maybe if I'm martyred, I'll make it. There's this certain other side of the call to holiness, which is there's a challenge that's in a human sense is attractive if we're willing to listen. And the other side of the other option is Britney Spears. The option are those poor kids with the green hair and the piercings everywhere and things hanging here. I mean, these poor young people, they're to be pitied. I don't bring them up to make fun of them. They don't have anything to live for. They don't have anything to live for. So they poke holes in themselves and they dye their hair and they just try to do anything to prove to themselves they're alive. Do you want to end up like that? With nothing to live for? To such an extent that you're tattooing and cutting holes in your ears and things? No, of course not. Of course not. So I guess, more or less in closing, think of the music, think of the movies, think of the culture that surrounds you, and say to yourself, there isn't anything over there that's really all that attractive at the end of the day. The devil wants us to think it's attractive, doesn't he? He wants us to think that's going to be a great thing, but it isn't. And if you want proof of that, just look at the performers themselves. Look where they're all ending up. Nobody wants to be there. Look at the suicide rates with young people, even people as young as you in this country, skyrocketing, right? So you have this great opportunity then. You're in St. Thomas Becket. Oh my goodness, you have this opportunity to learn your faith and to go out and to share it with other people and to be like Campion, to at least try to be like Edmund Campion, to try to be like Anne Lyon, to try to be like Margaret Clitheroe. Does anybody know Margaret Clitheroe, right? What girl in this room wouldn't just love to sit down for 10 minutes with Margaret Clitheroe, and hear her story? They say she was pregnant when she died, when she went to Tyburn. They say she was pregnant. In other words, she was willing to give everything for this thing that we say we are, Catholics. She was willing to give everything. I've been to Tyburn. It's very strange. It's in London, and it's in the middle of a semaphore with cars just going on all sides of it. It's very dangerous to get to Tyburn. You actually have to run across 4 lanes of very rapidly moving traffic to get to this spot, which is all, it's got the barricade, traffic barricades all the way around it, and there's just a little plaque in the ground. And so if you go there, you got to kneel down in front of this car going all around you, kneeling down to this sacred spot, because it's a holy place where the martyrs of Tyburn died. But it makes you ask the question, do we have what it takes? Do we believe like they believe? Now, you think to yourself when you're a young person, oh, maybe, I'm sure if I'm ever called to be martyred, it's going to be 100 years from now. What if it were right now? Would I have the courage? Now, don't answer this question yes, because it's a very dangerous question. If you say, yes, I have what it takes to be a martyr, the devil's going to zero in on you. You say, yes, I certainly hope and pray that I have what it takes to be a martyr. But knowing what kind of courage and what kind of faith prompted that martyrdom, I want you to, again, just think now when you leave today, go with your friends and talk about this. What part does this culture play in me making my decision to be anything like Edmund Campion, to be anything like Anne Lyon or Margaret Clitheroe? What part could it possibly play other than to destroy it inside of me, to drive out any urge on my part to be different, to be countercultural, to be Christ-like, to die like Father Michael Pro died, right? These men were against the culture and the times in which they lived. And that's what we have to be. That's what we have to be. And it sounds maybe it sounds simplistic. You know what that word means? It sounds like it's too easy. So all I have to do now to save my soul or to even be a saint someday is not listen to pop music? That's it? Well, that is simplistic, but it's a great start. Because if you take that noise out, and if you take those influences out, you learn from your catechism. You got to avoid the near occasions of sin. Can you think of a single band right now on top of your head? I hope you don't know of any, but let's say some of you that do know. Can you think of a single band whose lyrics now, we already discussed a little bit on the music, what's wrong with the music itself, whose lyrics, at least at one point in the album or in the CD, would not be considered an occasion of sin? There's my girl. Okay, moving right along before you think of one. No, I spent years in my high school years bringing home, little songs for my mom to listen to. Mom, listen to this one. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I'd find the best song on the CD and listen to, but they never passed with her. But thank God they didn't. But the point is, turn on. What's a better way of putting this then? I don't encourage anybody. I wouldn't want any of you to watch MTV. You know what MTV is? Old man question. Okay. But if you turn that on, there is nothing on that channel that plays for more than a minute that would not be considered either an occasion of sin or an actual sin to participate in or to watch, right? I mean, that's pretty much standard. Most people, even most of your Christian Protestant groups recognize there's nothing on MTV that any young person should belong to, right? So then if you think of putting into context, what is MTV? Music television. It is the top of the whole rock and roll world. It literally goes to every country, or just about every country in the world. It is rock and roll. It's the face of rock music, right? Pop music. Let's use that word. Pop music. And if you think about how degenerate it is and how in league with Satan it certainly is, and then you think what part of that industry, which has been waging war against what we believe and what our parents believe since the beginning, what part of that is not an offense against Our Lady or against to our Lord? So these are the little things you can think about as far as the music is concerned. And a couple got out the wall there, got over the wall. So so anyway, if you're honest with yourself, and it may take a few years, I know it did with me, until I finally woke up one day. If you're honest with yourself, you'll realize that all it does in every single case, from country to Marilyn Manson, it puts an obstacle in front of your spiritual life. And that's all it does, one way or another. Now, you can find some little yahoo like Garth Brooks that maybe had a tune that was okay. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I'm talking about for the most part. Are there exceptions here and there? Maybe. But that's that's playing with fire. It's playing with fire, so we have to... Does somebody have a question?
I wanted to ask, is there an audio tape that you could recommend that would define the physiological, what music does to you physiologically? You know.
Oh, there's a lot of it. There's a lot out there. There's books. Yeah. There's like books like Dr. David Noble's The Marxist Minstrels, which really is very interesting because it shows how the Soviets used music, folk music, to sort of further their agenda as well. And there's so much out there now. There's one thing good about some of the work that the Protestant groups are doing now in the field of culture, or even culture wars. Michael Jones has done some good work on that. Dionysus Rising, I think, it's very, very good. There's so much evidence, though, that's not the hardest thing to, as far as I'm concerned, the hardest thing to convince young people. The hardest thing to do is to make them face the fact, or to at least allow for the possibility that there is no music in rock music or pop music that can be acceptable in a Catholic home. That's the hardest thing, because then so many young people spend years and years trying to find the stuff that's okay, and gradually you're numb. You're like that piece of meat. You get numbed. You're not shocked. You're not surprised anymore. When I was a kid, abortion wasn't even legal, right? Something dramatic happened in this society. Now they have homosexual marriage. It's going so fast. There is international indoctrination going on right now. That's a full-scale assault, all-out war against Christ the King, against the Catholic Church. How are they doing it? How are they spreading these ideas so quickly to the point where no one's resisting? In my opinion, it's the music first. It's the music industry that's done it. Music has always been used in revolutions. And for 40 years, we've had this musical expression in our lives that's inescapable, that's an assault against Our Lady, that's an assault against purity, that's an assault against the moral theology of the Church. It only makes sense that after a while we're going to lose whole generations, as we now are, to this cultural revolution. So that's really, I think you guys, your day ends at 3. I'm just going to wrap it up right there real quick. If anybody has any questions, fine. Yeah?
I read your book. How was that bad for somebody to listen to?
Well, again, you can analyze the beat in that thing, thousands and thousands, 60,000 people doing it at every football game. Get everyone to do the same thing, right? And so from a musicology point of view, you can look at the syncopation of the music itself in that song. But then, of course, you just look at the man who sang it. Freddie Mercury died of AIDS. He's a homosexual. They were militant homosexuals. And is it in the lyrics where they say, what we're talking about actually is the homosexual? No, it's not in there. But everything that he stood for was about homosexual rights. I mean, that's what he was. He was a musician first. I mean, he was a homosexual first and a musician second. And so you can see some of these early people, that's one of the great, really sad things. You see traditional Catholic families, they drive 2 hours to Mass, they homeschool, they find a school like this. And then they let their young people listen to Bob Dylan and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones at home. Because, well, at least it's not Marilyn Manson or some Nine Inch Nails freak, right? The really strange thing about that is that who are the real revolutionaries? I mean, Marilyn Manson, I know I'm dating myself, who would be a better guy? Rob Zombie? This guy is just a barnacle. He's nothing. But John Lennon, Mick Jagger, these guys were real thinkers. These were philosophers. Freddie Mercury was another one. The Marxist minstrel himself, Bob Dylan. These guys were, in a sense, they were pop philosophers. They knew precisely what they were doing. All right, so it's really strange. It's very sad to see how many traditional Catholics are thinking that what was going on in the 60s was okay. When in the 60s, that's when you had the record burnings. That's when you had Catholic priests and rabbis, even the Vatican. The Vatican itself, when John Lennon, Beatles frontman, said, oh, you know, we're more popular than Jesus, and he insulted our Lord, he committed blasphemy. The Vatican demanded an apology, and John Lennon apologized. So in the beginning, that's another very important point, whoever was trying to say there's some of it's okay. It's very important to go back and talk to your grandmother. What did you think, Grandma, when this stuff first came out? Because that's the Catholic reaction. We've been numb to it. We all have been. We can't get away from it, right? So ask the older generation what they thought of it. They were the ones who were, as I say, protesting. Radios were refusing to play. The radio stations were refusing to play this music. Young people like you were burning records, et cetera, et cetera. So the initial reaction was the reaction of a Catholic. It's very difficult now to get an objective reaction to it because you cannot get away from it.
Okay, I have another question.
All right.
It's kind of hard between music to Beethoven or Mozart. But what does your family listen to for music?
Oh, I mean, I don't want to encourage anybody to go on the internet because the internet is just it's like a channel to hell. I mean, you know that. But the one thing about the internet, you know, if you can find, like, talk to maybe somebody in your community or whatever, like a responsible parent, to maybe start using iTunes or one of those downloadable, you know, where you can download music, because it's all there. And it's a dichotomy because you don't want to be spending any time on the internet. It's a very dangerous thing to do, and you know why. I'm not going to get into that. But the music is there. Like with my kids, you're going to laugh at this, but it actually really is very catchy music. It's a new band, and they're called the South Carolina String Band. South Carolina String Band. Okay, I challenge any of you to to have the CDs. It's not on old records or anything or in a gramophone. It's actually on CD. And I challenge you to get this music and tell me if you can't, you know, if you don't want to get up and start dancing to it as well. I mean, there's nothing wrong with fast-paced music. We need that. I'm not suggesting everybody have a steady diet of, you know, Victorian, Palestrina, and Mozart, although it's not bad. When you get to be my age, it sounds pretty good. But no, when you're your age, yeah, absolutely. You need fun music. And there's just this huge wealth of, especially Southern. I don't know if you're aware of, you know, like I say, South Carolina String Band is a band. They're reenactors, is what they're actually. My brother-in-law knows the guy. Well, he's a friend of his. But what they did is they went to Gettysburg to reenact with the reenactors who do the battles. You know, and the way the band formed is exactly the way it would have formed. Just soldiers who knew how to play instruments, you know, put this band together. Now they're really big. They did. I don't know, some soundtracks. What was that big Civil War movie a couple years ago? Gettysburg. They did the soundtrack for that. They're very good. Seriously, try these guys. Plus, they're inexpensive. And it's the greatest stuff. You can learn to sing. You know, like if you girls like to sing, the harmonies are wonderful. The rhythm is perfect. It's right on. It's a lot of fun. And it's perfectly harmless. And it's great. Here's the thing. What does that say about your grandmother and your great-grandmother and great-great-great-grandmother all the way back if the music was just so abhorrent that nobody had any fun until 1954 when Elvis Presley walked into Sun Records and rock and roll was born? How crazy is that? I mean, the greatest music in the world is out there, and there's 1,000 years of it. You know, I think it's going to take a while on iTunes to download it all, but it's all there, okay? So don't get into this rut that it has to be on MTV, that MTV has to be on the radio, it has to be pop music before I'm going to be able to like it. It's another form of temptation. Give these guys, please, I challenge you, that's the only band I can think of at the moment, the South Carolina String Band, give them a try. And see if you can't work that in. Because I do it with my children. And I have my oldest is 10, soon to be 11. They can't get enough of this stuff. Whenever it's time to clean the house, we're doing the old Hard Times Knocking at the Door, all these old Southern war songs and dance. So they're not just war songs, they're folk music, American folk music, real American folk music. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but give Give some of that a try before you determine it doesn't exist, because believe me, it really does exist. And then move on to Palestrina, because, that's the best there is. Yes?
Just an option. You could also do like old German folk music, and that's very upbeat, and also Irish music.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't go wrong with instrumental music.
Right.
So long as it's more of the traditional part.
No, it's all there. Scottish, Irish, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, doesn't all with your standards, doesn't it all start to bring it down with music?
If I were to just say simply yes, you might think that's my opinion. But it's not my opinion. You can actually go back and look at Life magazine, for example, or you can look at the old TV newsreels or whatever, the movies from the early 50s to the late 50s, and you can see precisely what you're talking about. Yes, because rock music, this music, what did it do first? You ever heard Elvis the Pelvis? That's what they used to call Elvis. What did he do? Elvis didn't invent anything, first of all. I mean, he pretty much ripped it off. He was the white kid that could sing the music from the blues, from the Deep South, right? He was the guy that could take that music and put it in and market it for white kids. That's all he did. And that's not a conspiracy theory. If he were alive, he would admit that's what happened. That's why he sold like he did. But what did he do? The first little revolution was in dance, to split up the couple. Now this started happening before in swing, but rock really did it, where you actually blew apart the couple. Now you have boys and girls that are not dancing in any sense, the minuet or something from the Middle Ages or whatever. Now they're just out there doing their thing, right? So that's the first revolution. Well, that leads to the revolution in dress, right? They start or sort of rebelling against the normal Christian mores, which by their physically prevented that kind of dancing. I don't want to get too graphic, but the way that a woman would dress, in other words, in the early part of the 20th century, did not facilitate too well what Elvis Presley was doing. So it had to update that. So this is rebellion against modesty. And the next rebellion, obviously, because parents are looking at their children on the dance floor and saying, you're not going to dress like that, you're not going to dance like that. Well, what's the next rebellion? Against parents, right? And ultimately, then you have this whole political rebellion that the 1960s rockers were very much involved with, the rebellion against the state itself. Well, now we have rebellion against marriage. People like Melissa Etheridge, Ellen DeGeneres, all these people, Elton John. For 30 years, we were listening to the little Disney tunes, The Lion King, Elton John, isn't he great? Well, we all know what Elton John is, right? I think. We don't? Well, you can guess. So we all got used to what Elton John is, and now he's just as right as rain, as American as apple pie, even though he's English. So you see how it does? It breaks down sensibilities against everything that we believe in. And there's these little revolutions. It's always been, and this isn't my theory, you can look at rock manuals, you can see it, it's always been the music of rebellion, right? And they're doing the same thing right now, and they want to give it to like young Protestant kids, young Catholic kids, anybody else, homeschooling kids, anybody who hasn't been on track with this. They'll find a way of getting that music to them so they can rebel against whatever little enclave might exist to prevent them from going over the edge like Britney Spears and everybody else is these days. So yeah, rebellion always from the start. But again, this isn't my theory. This is what's sold. You see, this is so hard to convince people who want to like music or young people or whatever. First and foremost, they marketed a product. They took the rebellion, the natural rebellion of teenagers, and they marketed it. They gave music to it. They gave dress to it. They gave ideas to it. First and foremost, because teenagers have a lot of money. So don't ever forget, there's another side of this whole thing. There's a Luciferian dark side against the soul and against the church. There's also the market side. This stuff sells. It really sells. So it's a combination. But in the end, you look out your window, and you're not here, but in most cities, you look out the window and you see the result. Total annihilation of everything good, of everything pure. And the music was, I'm not going to exaggerate, but the music certainly played 80%. The role the impact that it had, the most important impact, I would say music was it. Second only to Hollywood, or Hollywood would be second to it, yeah. Sure. Yeah, and even probably more immediately if young traditional Catholics see you, like high school or college traditional Catholics, sort of like, well, I'm going to get the old iTunes out or the old headset or whatever, and I'm going to kind of start bending a little bit and accepting more and more. That is like a floodgate. If you have a 10-year-old who knows that his 16-year-old sister is listening to, who might it be in a traditional Catholic? Nelly Furtado or somebody maybe not totally extreme, but really goofy. Anyway, you have a young person, 10-year-old, see that his sister's doing that. By the time the 10-year-old is 16, He's going to be listening to that and much more, okay? So it's so important for older people, older traditional Catholics, to just hold the standard. And that's why I don't suggest the South Carolina string band just as an alternative, but I really, really want to see older traditional Catholic young people stick to it. And I know that part of sticking to it is not just the spiritual, it's not just the Mass. There's also the family. There's also fun. There's also things that make up that make us what we are. And part of that is to enjoy life. God gave us the gift of life. We should enjoy it. And so if we don't provide alternatives, music for you older people, young people, that you can enjoy and have fun with and learn to sing and do the harmonies and maybe play the instruments with, and really show young people that you're not missing out on anything. You don't need to have everything plugged in and cranked as loud as it can and dunka, dunka, dunka constantly. You don't need it. You don't need it, and you can have so much more fun. You must sit around and sing sometimes. Folk songs. Maybe you play a guitar or something, you sing and you have fun. Old tunes, right? I hope that happens sometimes. If it doesn't, well, after this we'll sit down and have a little class. We'll do some singing. No, seriously. You have to do that. That's a big part of it. You know, and then the young people will see that it's possible, and we can make a difference. That's the thing. We really can make a difference. It's a cliche, I know, but we really can go out and change the world, because what the world is offering ain't working. Obviously, it's not working. We got chaos out there. Yes, ma'am.
I know, like you said, you're tired and exhausted, and you can't think right now. But for me, music's never been a real love for it, but it's just the noise, because I have a large family, so I'd rather not have it.
Right.
So with my kids, I do have a love. My husband has a love for music. So if you do in the next week or two, think of some things that, because I'm not good at going out and searching it out, like you said, to bring it to my kids in a good form. If there's anything you can think about, and let Father know, or email him, or fax them, and say, here's some other things that people could.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's where my fault is I just, like I said, it's not important to me because I don't have a love for music, but my husband and my kids do. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing to bring up too, because I've noticed a sort of a Jansenistic reaction to this. Well, we're not going to have any music in the house. That's fatal. That's absolutely fatal. And I mean, I don't know if you got a pencil or something, but like with young people, believe it or not, there's a violinist, one of my favorite violinists. When I was just a kid, my mom took me to see him. His name is Ishak Perlman. I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy. I started playing violin when I saw him. I mean, I was never so moved in my life by anything. When I was in a little rock band, and when I was watching Steve Perry and Journey do their asinine thing there back in '84, I was never ever moved as I was as maybe a 12-year-old watching Ishak Perlman play his violin. And thankfully, most all of his stuff is out there, so you can get, especially for little kids, believe it or not, Perlman playing Vivaldi. Because Vivaldi concentrates so much on sort of fast-paced violin music, and some oboe for odd combination. But anyway, and that sounds funny now, but it's not. I mean, little kids, my little 5-year-old, if I put on Vivaldi for her, she's just crazy, running around the house having a blast. She's not missing Christina Aguilera. Thank God. Yes.
Well, one thing you haven't talked about is, it's not new, but it's kind of new, is the Il Divo and Josh Groban. Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
Well, tenors, singers, but now they're going in. When they first started, I heard them, and they were doing good music, but now they're going in, they're picking up all the pop, they're redoing all the pop songs.
Right.
About that.
No, that's what Christian rock has been doing for so long. I mean, and parents aren't aware of that. Just like a lot, from a marketing point of view, a lot of mainstream top 40 rock bands would always have that parent song on their CDs or on their records or tapes, the one that that was soft and was palatable for moms and dads. Christian rock's doing the same thing, only inverting that. They'll always do, most of them, Jars of Clay or whoever, Christian rock band that you might run into, oftentimes you'll find like an Ozzy Osbourne song cover that they'll do. It's just the strangest thing. It's like this little bow to the God of rock and roll, that no matter how Christian you are, you're always going to put this one, hard rock, acid rock, heavy metal song on the thing and do it in this loving, lordly way. Christian rock, as far as I'm sorry, I hope nobody throws rocks at me, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd, because the music has been used to rebel against Christ. You can't use pornography in a Christian way. And I say in my book, there people are trying to do that. I'm not going to get into that here. But in any case, you know what I mean. You can't. So Christian rock, although a lot of the people that are involved with it have the best intentions, and I appreciate that and understand that, it's not going to work. As long as it's hooked up to rock, it's not going to work. And it doesn't need to be. That's the thing. Young people, as I say, for thousands of years.
Voices, and they started off with classical, and now they're all running to the top.
Right, right. That seems to be the pattern. So, all right. Anybody else? No? Okay. Good. What's that? I hate that question. No, I do because it's always, I've never wanted, like I say, I used to listen to rock music, and it took a long time. It took a long time to get over it.
Frequently asked questions to a parent.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. To say it's bad to listen to this band or whatever, what I think is much more interesting is trying to get young people to, on their own, just not want to look for the one or two good songs or whatever, just to throw it all out. Just to throw it all out. Because that's the only thing, seriously, I can see the look on your face. It looks just like me 20 years ago. Mom, come on! Okay, my fault. Touche, I shouldn't have said the word Vivaldi. I agree. I agree, but there's just this wealth of other music, pop music, some of it we already covered, folk music, Irish, Scottish music. You know what? You got to, listen, this is, now you're really going to think I'm a fascist, but you've got to learn to, okay? You have to learn to like it. And listen, I'm telling you, to this day when I hear a Journey song, something happens inside, and I resent it so much that they got inside of me like that with this stuff, right? It takes a long time, but I promise you, once you get over it, you have to acquire a taste for it. You have to go back. It's like good art. Rock music is bad, is construction, bad music, right? But you can appreciate and you can learn to appreciate good music. It's the same like as if you're on a steady diet of Picasso. It's going to take a while before you can do a Renoir or whoever, you pick your favorite, Michelangelo. But you will get there. It's the same with music. You have to learn to do it. That's the only way. And again, it has to come. It's just not arbitrary. Well, if I listen to that song, I'm going to go to hell. If I listen to that song, I'm going to become a saint. It's not that. You have to put it in the context of what you want to do with your life. That's why I say just to leave it purely on a discussion of music. You have to combine it when you're talking to a Catholic audience with what do you want to do with yourself. What are you going to do? Are you going to go out and make a difference, or are you just going to be a Punkenstein, going through like trying to listen to whatever you can to get by and really not being different? It has to come with a commitment to be different. But the upside is, once you immerse yourself in good music, you'll never want to go back. You just have to trust me on that. I know you don't believe me at this point, but it's true. No, I absolutely agree. And that's one of the big, again, the shortcomings of what people like me have tried to do out there talking about this music. They do two things. They pretend like they act as though music is not important, and they forget to grab these young people by the hand and recognize where they are. See, that's the thing. Music is very important. Wanting to belong to your generation is an incredibly powerful thing. And I think a lot of times that's overlooked. I want to, with my kids, I want to grab them, take them by the hands and love them and lead them through a really dark place. And that's the ages between, well, you're more experienced parents than I am, but I would say between the ages of about 14 and 19. They need to be loved and they need to be led. And they don't need to be barked at or told that music is garbage or it sounds like factory music. It sounds like a factory noise. What's the problem with it? You have to understand this music is marketed specifically to this 11-year-old. Everything that she thinks about and dreams about, these marketeers understand what she's seeing and they're playing to that. So I absolutely agree with you. We have to understand what they're up against. We have to provide alternatives. And we have to recognize the importance of things like music and having fun in the lives of young people, young Catholics. And if we don't, we're going to lose them because these guys want to have fun. They don't want to sit around and listen to me all day. They want to have fun. They want to have music. And they want to grow spiritually. But the growing spiritually, that part of it, you guys, is going to come more and more as you get older. That's just what happens. As you kind of get out of high school, you start running into the world more. And then all of a sudden, you're going to start thinking about what your mother said, and what your father said, and what your priest said. And then all of a sudden, you're going to find yourself responding, and things that come out of your mouth that you never thought would come out because of the words of your mother, or the words of your priest, or whatever. You're like, whoa, who said that? But it will happen. It will happen. And then you're going to really appreciate when you start having kids, and you look at these little children, and you realize how much, especially for girls, how much work, what labor is like, what pregnancy is like, what homeschooling is like. And you're going to let these barbarians pump their garbage music into these little skulls full of mush, these little kids. that you have a responsibility to take their soul and to give it back to God someday. And I hope that's what we've done today. I'm going to let you guys go. I know it's getting late, so thanks a lot for listening.